Hey guys, so you don't even know how excited I am. So last fall, LDSPrepper called me out of the blue and said, I'm doing this greenhouse, this geothermal greenhouse, and I'm trying to get a hold of people in the area to be able to come see it before I fill the hole in. And I was able to go out and photograph it and take videos of it, and it was so exciting. In fact, the visit that I had with him inspired me to do my Kickstarter to get the greenhouse, because talking to him as somebody new to the area, he's new to our area, looking at what he came into the area knowing it was where he wanted to be, and he needed to still be able to provide food for his family. And so this was his solution, is that in order to really grow your food for your family, you need a greenhouse in our area. So he was the inspiration for me getting my greenhouse. Now, I didn't do it the same way that he did, because I felt like I didn't have the know-how. I didn't have the technical grasp on greenhouses to be able to just build my own the same way that he did. And so what I did was the tough greenhouse, and I have come up with some things that I believe his greenhouse far outshines my greenhouse. My greenhouse is great. It has a double wall of plastic. It keeps my quail happy. I'm able to garden in it, and that's fantastic. However, he's put up a couple little videos of his greenhouse at this point, and some of the drawbacks in mine are, one, it still freezes pretty hard in there. When I put tomatoes out there, they had a really super hard time. It didn't kill all of them, but I definitely still had to have them covered at night. And the other thing is, he does the meat leader system that requires less space, less water, and less time, and you also don't have to weed as much because you're not overwatering your soil, you're not having weeds come up, you're just watering the plant at its base. So I have so many questions for him this time, trying to pick his brain on how things have worked, because he is kind of a pioneer in this system. There are other people who have done it, but I've never seen it done in this area. And he's already a really excellent gardener, and so he really knew what to look for in the health of his plants, and to recognize what would be a problem and to fix it. So I'm about to head over to his house to get this video, and I'm super excited. And I'm going to use my GoPro. So Mr. the Kid, thank you so much for the GoPro, because I want to be able to get all this really up close, and I needed a good camera to do it. So I'm going to use the GoPro. Okay guys, this is David Gilmore, the LDSPrepper, and we came out, was it October?
I think so.
About October, and he had a huge hole out here behind him where the greenhouse is now, the geothermal heating and cooling, and I'd never heard of anything like that. I thought it was phenomenal if it would work, but I was skeptical of our wind and our cold, and David has really shown that it works. We've seen the videos of what he's been able to get done, so we're going to let him take over and show us this amazing thing that he's done.
Okay. Well, let's go into the greenhouse. Okay, so let's stop here. This is a dual wall inflated greenhouse. 2 days ago we had 66-mile-an-hour winds. It didn't bother it at all. The reason is because it's dual wall. So when the wind comes, it hits this plastic, and it's like hitting a pillow. It just takes all the energy out of the wind. And so having a dual wall inflated versus a single wall is really going to absorb that energy and last a lot longer. This plastic here is guaranteed for 4 years. It's UV protected. It's greenhouse plastic. The professional gardener's greenhouse down the road has the same plastic on theirs. They exchange it or replace it every 7 years. So having dual wall will make it last longer and give you dramatically more thermal protection.
And you even have a double on your door.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, I doubled it just so I have that same thermal.
So you didn't have a weak spot where everything was leaching.
Correct. All right, so if you want to ask questions or walk through, or I don't know exactly.
I guess the comparison I wanted to make was, okay, so I spent over $3,000, almost $4,000 on my greenhouse, and it likewise has the double cushion. However, the end caps do not have double, and the door does not have double, and so they are a huge leak, a huge heat loss. Because again, you guys have seen my greenhouse. This is just a single sheet. It's of the reinforced plastic. It's still greenhouse plastic. It's reinforced, but there's no insulative value at all in that plastic. The other big differences that I see in this one are you have a little more headroom here on the sides. Mine starts to get a little bit short here on the edges, and it looks like yours is more solid. They just stuck T-posts in the ground, and then everything is screwed in, but it's a little bit haphazard. And how much space do you have in here? How many square feet?
From side to side, we're 20 feet, and then we're 40 feet long, and we're 9 feet tall.
Okay.
Now you can see that I've got my first grow box here 3 feet in from the edge on both sides, on the north side and also the south side. The reason for that is because I know it's going to get cold during the winter, and I don't want my plants right next to the plastic.
Yeah.
And so I purposely brought them in because it can get really, really cold on that plastic.
Mm-hmm.
You probably have seen ice on the inside of your plastic. So if your plants are inside, not touching that plastic, and have some room for air to move around them from the Geo-Air system, then they're not going to freeze.
Okay. That's fantastic. And now I remember I've seen your video where you already had things up and growing quite early, but right now you have your venting. You have an open door at the end there and an open door here, so you don't need a fan per se because the air is just traveling free through here.
The air travels pretty well through here, although I do have 2 fans.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a fan here that was left over from the previous homeowner, and if it gets warm in here, I'll turn that on, kind of push the air through. And then I have a fan on the other end that helps pull the hot air out.
If you need it.
If I need it, right.
And
I'm also considering getting some shade cloth that will go over the top.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with the shade cloth and the Geo-Air running with the doors closed, I'll be able to keep it cool during the summer. Haven't done that yet,
right?
But that's something I'm considering. The drawback to that is I want my doors open for the pollinators that come in.
Right.
So that I need to balance how that works.
Well, and we have the automatic venting with one here and then the fan at the base, and we have found that those little slats are not enough to let the pollinators in. So we face the same problem, even though we have an open system, because we have those 2 vents that open, and they have, I don't know, a couple inch spaces in between each of the slats, but the bees are not finding their way in. Yeah. They need
a big space.
An open invitation, apparently, to get in.
Yeah. Well, come on in. Here on the southwest side is my germination seedling table. You can see I'm germinating more corn. This is for my 4th crop. Wow. And you'll see the other corn outside. We're building strawberries boxes for my wife, so we'll have 6 grow boxes outside between the solar panels and the house. Okay. And this watermelon is going to go outside in the soil beds, and we've got watermelon in here growing vertically.
Amazing.
And then this is my watering can. I mix up 1 ounce of pre-plant fertilizer to 3 gallons of water, and I give it to the babies. I call it baby food. Okay. And water them when the soil needs water. That way they get food and water every day.
Is that the meat liter mix? Or is it
the Mint weekly feed?
It's a weekly feed, okay.
So it's a really diluted solution. The only time we dilute it in water is when we're feeding the babies in the nursery.
Okay, that's fantastic.
So one thing I want you to look at is the volume of food that's being produced in here. Mm-hmm. It really is a high yield production. Right here we had cabbages, 6.5 pound cabbages that came out of here, size of soccer balls, and as soon as those came out, we put peppers in. So we're trying to keep things growing all the time. And
how cold? Because I remember being amazed when I saw your last video. I'm just like, those are mature. He must have put those in February or March. How well did the Geo-Thermal operate for winter?
Perfect.
So about what was your temperature in here?
Well, let's look over here. These tomato plants are as tall as you.
They are. They're gorgeous.
So inside of here, I've got a thermometer, and it tells me every 10 minutes, sends data to the internet, the temperature and humidity in here. And I have one on the outside on my garden shed too. So every 10 minutes I get an update on the temperature. So the coldest it got during this warm winter, since I had the greenhouse up, was 8 degrees outside, and it was well above freezing in here. So nothing froze.
Wow.
Now I found that the colder it gets outside, the bigger the difference is inside of here. When it starts warming upside, when it warms up outside, the difference between the inside and the outside, it gets closer.
Right.
So it's working great. It's not overheating, and it with the Geo Air. And as the colder it gets outside, the more it stays above freezing in here.
So I have a question then. This winter was extreme. God loves you because he gave you a very mild winter this winter. It usually gets down at least to -20 and stays that way for at least a month. So I'm super excited to see how it works when we get some really, really cold temperatures. But 8 degrees is still freezing no matter how you cut the cake. It's still freezing. So it would be interesting.
24 degrees below freezing.
Yeah. So I wonder what the difference will be when you have another almost 30-degree drop, if it really cares.
Right.
That'll be really interesting to see.
It will be. And I was praying for -17-degree weather during the
right,
winter,
just so you could test it.
but it didn't happen. Now, one thing I'm doing, I'm all about preparedness and having backup to my backup. And so I do have a very efficient water well.
Right.
However, if there's an earthquake and that shaft shifts, then I have no water.
Right.
So what I'm doing in here is I'm taking 24 30-gallon black drums and putting it across here. That'll give me hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of gallons of water.
Idea.
And it'll also work as a heat sink during the winter because it's on the north side.
And that's what we did. The plants that we put out, we had a big 50-gallon drum that we had out in the middle of the greenhouse, far away from the walls, and the plants that we put in their boxes around that were the only ones that we didn't have freezing problems with. So if you had a whole line of that, well, and do you use this for walking much, or is it just there? You said it was there for a buffer against the walls. Do you spend much time walking in there? Is it gonna?
No, I don't walk in there at all.
So it would be perfect. And you don't think it'll block enough of the sunlight out to matter because you got the overhead light, correct?
Well, this is north, so we don't really get much sun here at all during the winter.
Okay.
Your camera dropped.
I was trying to make sure and get your bed.
Oh, okay. I see.
I'm hoping I get something of everything in case one of them doesn't work.
So that's fine. But during the winter, I've noticed during the summer, is it summer yet?
Not quite.
Okay. The sun is much further north as it comes across the horizon than in winter. In winter, it comes over here. So during the winter, I'm not worried about blocking any sun here because the sun never gets to the north side of the greenhouse.
Right.
But it'll give me two dual purposes. It'll give me a dual purpose: water storage above ground instead of water production, and also a heat sink during winter.
I think that's fantastic. And you have I'm impressed with your spacing. Your spacing here with the Mittlighter, am I saying it right? Mittlighter method is that I have all mine in boxes. So again, the weeds can't get in, the water stays in. My big problem with the boxes is I cannot transplant from them because my box starts to fall apart. And so I had to be super, super careful about my spacing because they start to shade each other out very quickly. And so I like that. And you used the pressure treated board.
Yes.
So you don't have rotting? Is that the purpose?
It's important to use pressure treated lumber. Yes. Lumber is treated now with copper. Copper is a trace element. It's a necessary nutrient for plants.
So didn't they use something pretty nasty before?
13 years ago, they ended using. 13 years ago, they ended using arsenic.
Oh, is that what they were using? Wow.
So if any copper leaks into the soil, it's going to be beneficial to the plant.
Okay.
But I haven't ever found that to be a case in all the Mittlighter gardens we've had.
And then it's a pre-mixed soil, isn't it?
What this is you can see over here, this is 2 parts sawdust and 1 part sand.
Okay.
And I just mix it myself. I get the sawdust from local lumber mills or cabinet shops and so forth. And then this is a coarse sand.
So do you go in with the truck and get it? Do they charge you for it?
The cabinet shop that I get the sawdust from, he used to have to rent a dumpster, pay a monthly fee on that, and then he stopped doing that, and then he started hauling it to the dump and had to pay a fee on that.
Right.
He loves it when I show up. He calls me and says, "Hey, I've got all the sawdust already bagged up for you. Come get it." And so I'm saving him $40 to $60 a month in dump fees.
Yeah.
So one man's trash is another man's treasure, and we're growing just absolutely beautiful food in sawdust and sand.
I think that's phenomenal. And if you can find that kind of source, we do that a lot because we mulch around our trees with a lot of wood bark. But you do, this is what I have to say. I've had people ask me before about that kind of resource. I'm like, you have to be available to get it when they want you to come get it. You have to reach out and find them, and you really have to be available to do it at their convenience if you want the free.
That's right.
The free resource. It can't just be on your time. It has to be on their time. And so I think that's the trick, and I think that's phenomenal.
Yeah. Well, the spacing comes from the Mid-Latitude Gardening course, gardening detail sheet. And for example, these plants here are bush tomato plants. They're a celebrity. So they get planted further apart than the 9 inches apart from the vertically growing indeterminate tomato plant.
Which would be unheard of to plant tomatoes that close. But since you have the trellis system so they can grow up instead of falling all over themselves, 9 inches apart, that's phenomenal.
Yeah, so as you can see, we have 1 row of, and we've got tomatoes all through here.
Amazing.
We got 1 row of plants, not 2 rows. And so what we do, and that's for ease of access, watering, weeding, so forth. So we have 1 row twice as close together, but this number 1 plant grows to the north, number 2 grows to the south, number 3 goes to the north. So these 2 plants are actually growing 18 inches apart.
So they have plenty of sunlight.
They have plenty of sunlight, as you can see.
Well, that's another question I have. We have the outer layer of our bubble is white, not transparent. And I'm really concerned that we're not getting enough sunlight. It feels more like a darkened sunroom when you walk into it than an open light system. And I know the reason they did that is because they were in southern Utah, and harsh conditions, too much light held in, creates too much heat. And so I'm concerned we're actually not going to get enough sunlight. It gets warm in there still. I'm sure that having that white over the top helps with keeping the heat down, but I'm really concerned they're in quasi shade. And I really don't think that works very well for a greenhouse, to be in quasi shade all year.
Whether everything we do in the Mid-Latitude gardening method has to do with 6 laws of plant growth that Jacob came up with. The first law is light. The second law is temperature.
Yeah.
So if you've got too much light inside of an enclosed area, you're going to be getting raised temperatures.
Yeah.
So you've got to find a balance where there's enough light and enough temperatures. It's really easy to find out if you have enough light. Take a look how thick these stalks are on these tomato
They're like
plants.
trees.
All right. Now I've seen tomato plants as, that tall and stems thinner than my little finger.
Right.
That means they're stretching for light. If you look at all of these tomato plants, and even these different varieties, we have 3 different varieties here.
They're all thick.
They're all thick. That means they're not reaching for light. Because we've got tomatoes ripening here
And
June
it's almost
2nd.
June. Most people can't plant tomatoes out until almost the middle of June.
Yeah. Yeah, we could be eating that tomato this weekend.
I love how open it is. I have to say my favorite, at first it looks a little bit stark when you look at it, like, really doesn't have that much growing, but then when you go in and look at it a little closer, what you see is that there's light coming in from every direction for these plants. There's no space where they are shadowed. And so you look how big these peppers are. These are not terribly huge pepper plants, and yet they're covered in peppers.
So why are they not huge pepper plants?
They're producing a lot of fruit.
Because they don't need to become huge looking for light. So they spend that energy in producing fruit.
I'm amazed.
I want to grow fruit,
not leaves
not
and stem.
leaves. Exactly. And these are, I mean, it's June 2nd. Look at these.
They are
peppers.
almost ready, aren't they?
They are. They're just absolutely
They're just
beautiful.
shy of just being ready and ripe.
Yeah, and these are turning color here.
Yeah, they're beautiful. And I did see your cabbages. Didn't I see your cabbages on your video? Didn't we get them in there? They were enormous.
Yeah.
And as
those were the two small ones we were letting get a little bit bigger. So now we're making sauerkraut right now.
And so for the trick for you, what I'm seeing is this is not an enormous growing space. It's the fact that you plant and you pluck and plant. You do them synonymously with each other. As soon as you harvest something, you put something else into that space. And so you don't have to plant your whole greenhouse at the same time. You're planting small parts of your greenhouse incrementally through the season as it's more appropriate for different plants. Oh, is that a cucumber? Or a squash?
Where?
Do you honestly have? You do. Isn't that a cucumber?
Yes. We've been eating cucumbers for a month.
That's amazing. See, and the reason I got my greenhouse was after we did our visit here, where we came in and saw what you were doing, and we talked about, after seeing the peonies, we talked, you coming from Texas, and how much you had grown in Texas on your other channel, to have you come here, choose this is where we want to be, and yet our growing season is so scary, interesting, to say you can't grow here if you don't have a greenhouse. If you want to grow,
and then I have to start this end because I'm left-handed.
Me too. So it works for southpaws.
It does. And then we want to put the nutrients about 4 inches away from the plants, which is right where my watering line is. And so I just come through. This nutrient mix, somebody asked me about a month or two ago what the cost to fertilize using this. So I added up the cost. I bought some 16-16-16 at Home Depot. I bought some Epsom salts at Walmart. And then the micronutrient mix from MidlanderGardening.com.
Mm-hmm.
So I added up the cost for all that, and I'm growing these tomatoes.